There we go. All right. So I see Bill and all these guys. It's just like romper room. I see Bill and Bob. Anybody have any specific questions? Any technical questions? Any issues?
Hey Jay, it's Bruce Huber. I just got off of a webinar from Penn State about solar farms. And I guess Penn State's got some solar farms up and running. They're generating like 25%. I was kind of interested. They have, they're tracking their panels. They're moving every 10 minutes to, and I asked the guy, and of course they are running on motors, but I thought that was kind of interesting that they would be doing that on a utility scale.
Yeah, it's pretty common. In fact, most of the utility scale systems out there now are going to be on trackers. They're actually typically east-west orientation. So, we think of everything as facing south, but these utility scales are typically going to be east-west. So if they're on, I'll put my arm here, but let's say they're on a long tracker, and in the morning, the panel would be facing east, and as it goes through the day, noon, it's going to be flat like that, and in the afternoon, it's going to be facing west. And apparently at that scale, those tracking systems are economical. I have a feeling a lot of that, especially the further north you are, is to dump the snow off of the panels in the wintertime. By having that tracking system, that's going to help clear without any staff having to be involved in it. So that may be part of it, but and it may also be because they have the personnel and the maintenance crews to go ahead and maintain any of those moving parts. So, but it's pretty common.
Thank you.
Yeah, another weird thing with the utility is it seems like a lot of them are thin film as opposed to crystalline panels, which surprised me when I saw that. It's the majority, more than 50%. Yeah, Bob, you have a question?
Yeah, last time we talked about costs. Standard United States is $2.50 a watt. And then you said in commercial, it went down to like $1.75 per watt. And then you used that word thin film. So how do you get it down to $1.75 a watt? What is thin film? I don't understand that.
Well, thin film is the, of course, it's like I always called it in class, the Harbor Freight solar panels, the cheapy ones that are not crystalline. But there's a manufacturer in Toledo. Does anybody remember the name of that? First Solar, maybe, or First?
Yeah,
was it First Solar?
It's First Solar.
Yeah, they're the huge manufacturer. I think they're headquartered in Phoenix, but they've got some big operating plants like up in northern Ohio, and they're a leading manufacturer for utility scale systems. But the price per watt on utility is down around $1 a watt. So it's real cheap. Commercial, like I said, more like $1.75, and then residential is in the $2.50 range. Unless you're in Illinois, then it's up around what, $3, somewhere in there. Illinois was a pretty high price market, but I think it's just economy of scale. You go in there with you can install an awful lot of solar panels without a lot of labor. And
so the number one cost is, of course, the micro converters and the solar panels.
Well, no, the number
You
one
got a
cost
person
is
shaking their head no here.
Yeah, the number one cost is going to be design, installation, profit, and balance of systems type costs. One of the reasons why the utility scale is going to be so cheap is because essentially you get rid of some of that, a lot of the installer cost, a lot of the profit motive cost, all of that's going to be built into their system.
Name one.
What's that?
Name
Well,
one.
Well, what they're doing is instead of you, for instance, having to hire an installation firm and they've got all of the overhead there, they're oftentimes contracting with local unions to just bring out labor. So they're getting it, you know, in like bulk purchasing. So you can get 10 guys who are doing nothing but carrying panels. You get 10 guys who are doing nothing but screwing them down. You know, one guy with a GPS coordinated auger that's drilling all the posts, and you can get a lot of stuff put in there pretty cheap. So you're of the cost of a solar installation, I think the hardware is only about a third of the cost, if I remember right. Yeah, so it's really marketing, which is customer acquisition. It's design, profit, overhead, installation. You know, that's going to be the 2/3 of the cost. Well, not 2/3, because then you have permitting cost, you know, some of the soft costs, transportation, financing, carrying costs. So really, the hardware is only going to be about a third. You know, at least on a retail. I suspect on a utility, it's much higher percentage because you've minimized some of the other costs. Anybody want to add anything to that? Yep, Chris, I see you're waving.
Well, it's only because I haven't seen you in a while. How you been? Good? I see.
Good.
Yeah, shorter hair. I didn't recognize you at first.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
yeah,
so I wonder, I've had a lot of problems with Solar Edge. Has anybody else experienced any problems with them? I'm on my third inverter. The first one failed due to a voltage problem. The second one failed for exactly the same reason. And they keep saying that it's something to do with capacitors. But after the first one, they said the second one, they had resolved the issue, but it ran for about 4 months. And then it took me probably respond to me and get any issues resolved. And it was exactly the same fault both times. And they sent me a new one, which is the same one, but they can't even guarantee that it is not going to have the same problem. I mean, I've been dealing with Alt-E through this the whole time. And Alt-E caused me some problems too, because you have to contact them first because they're the supplier. So you go through them, and it took them 4 or 5 weeks before they even got back to me. And it caused me all kinds of, I lost hundreds of dollars just because the one technician at Alt-E said he was going to pass it on to service people. And I waited, and I never heard anything back. So I called them back, and somehow it fell through the cracks. And I just couldn't get any satisfaction from either one of them. I ended up calling them back and emailing and calling and emailing and calling email. And I finally got it. But you know what it means. I mean, and they don't even take into consideration that we had to take the other one out and put a new one in. And you know I did mine. So it was just me who did it. But still, if you think of the cost of this because of their failure to provide a good product.
Well, I know that Alt-E, I have heard some complaints about some of their customer service recently. So I don't know, it may be just individuals or it may be systematic there. But one of the things with Solar Edge, people moved to Solar Edge because their customer service was better than Enphase that was having a lot of trouble. But now recently I've heard, I mean, Enphase's has been pretty good. So I don't know, has anyone else had any issues with Solar Edge? I mean, I haven't seen anything. You did, Bob?
Well, I've worked in electronics manufacturing of making products just like this for most of my life. And I can tell you that the fastest way of having what you described is to not have static control in your process. Just picking up a board by your hand without having your body discharge will stress out junctions on a micro basis. And this is what you're going to get. And if you go cheap in China, they don't even know about the requirements to keep the safe, and they're time bombs because they work. They go through quality control, and then when they go out in the field to start to get stressed out is when the junctions fail. And this
Out
is
of
a big
Israel.
problem in the industry.
Alte's out of Israel.
Yeah, but
It
I
doesn't-
suspect their manufacturing is not done in Israel. I suspect it's somewhere else. I don't know where. But
Yeah.
I know with Enphase, they are out of California, but they're assembled in Mexico. So,
Yeah.
at least the microinverters.
Yeah. Well, I did some research and it was found that they had a capacitor issue with the suppliers. They were getting bad capacitors. And I can understand that the first one, which was probably well over a year ago, but I can't understand having the same issue with the second one.
Do you think it may be something unique to your site? You're fairly far back from the road. Could you be having high voltage or low voltage coming in there that might affect the unit?
But that's what the capacitor is supposed to resolve, isn't it? It's allow that so it didn't happen.
Well, I don't
To a
know where is your substation located, because you may find that you're right on the borderline, with the grid. We've run into it before where the voltage coming in, it's like 240 plus or minus 6%. So if you're coming in at say 255 or something,
Right.
and then you get a slight surge, it may be enough, to blow your system without it actually shutting down your grid.
Yeah. Well, this one's actually shutting down the grid. It just won't work. That's
Yeah,
the whole solar
I
array.
would check the voltage coming in. It's not that, but it's probably a quality issue, just like you're identifying. But, you eliminate some things. I don't know. I know on my system, it always is telling me that the voltage coming in is at like 245, like 245.7, something like that. So, but
Yeah. I don't know. I talked to Alt-E and they got their engineers to look at it because they designed the system. I don't know if you remember that. They designed it. And their engineer went through it and they talked to the people at Solar Edge and they said, as per their design, that things like that shouldn't happen.
yeah.
Because they say it's designed properly.
Okay.
I mean, well, you have to design it, so.
Yeah. Hey, John. Yeah, I see John has a comment on this. I muted you, John, because you always give us a little feedback. John Lotus, you're still on mute.
What about surge suppression? What is his surge suppression like or doing, or does it not exist? That would be my question.
Yeah.
Well, mine just goes through my main house, then it goes down to my pole barn, goes through that panel, then it goes through the switch with the surge surge protector on top. So I think it has a surge protector.
Yeah, you'd have a surge protector, probably, it seems to me we put one in protecting your system from any surges that might hit the array, but probably not from anything coming from the grid.
The grid, yeah.
So it
No, it's
might be
got-
worthwhile looking at something like that. Maybe are you on Guernsey, Muskingum?
Yep.
Yeah, it could be a power quality issue too. It might be worthwhile looking into seeing if there's some little cheapy thing you could put on your whole grid, your whole system, to just clean up your power coming in. But I would have thought you'd have problems with other appliances if that were the issue. Yeah.
We've never had a problem. Never.
Yeah, my guess
Anyhow.
is we're jumping down the wrong track. It's probably a quality thing with Solar Edge.
It's a good thought, though. It's a good thought,
Yeah.
though. But I always said, it was my understanding that capacitors are supposed to take the highs and lows out of that so that we don't get those kind of surges. And it's built right into the inverter, both ways.
Yeah, a capacitor, of course, will absorb power and discharge power, which would seem to even out some of the dips and surges. So, Bill,
I
did you?
I was going to say, probably in a third world country, that may be a bigger problem than what I should have here.
No, you're in a third world country. You're in Muskingum County, so that's for sure. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
Bill?
why we live there.
Yeah. I'm not getting any sound from you, Bill. Doesn't show you as muted, but
We're
no,
losing.
we're still not getting you. It's all right. You're gonna have to type, I guess, something with your mic. All right,
Yeah.
while we're resolving that, and if anybody else has anything, I wanted to just jump on. Remember, we were talking last time about the theoretical limits of solar panel efficiency. And I had mentioned, I remembered somewhere there was some theoretical limits, and they were talking about with the perovskite being put on as a coating, they're surpassing that. And I did look it up. It's referred to as the Shockley Quasar limit. And that was developed back in 1961, estimated to be about 30%, which is the theoretical best case series, or best, and there's some caveats in there. It's a single PN junction, and it's at 1.1 electron volts. So that's kind of what's been the standard with silicon panels. Now it seems like they've adjusted that limit with the advent of PERC panels, PERC. That's more the standard today, where they've got some little reflective layer on the bottom of the panel, that kicks some of the rays back up and gets a second bite at the apple. But it's still at about 33.7%. is essentially the Shockley Quasar limit. We're beginning to see that limit extended, and a lot of the literature is saying that seems to be a soft limit. It was sort of thrown out there, but technology keeps proving it wrong. So my guess is we're going to extend beyond it. But when you talk about multiple layers, which they're moving towards a lot, then that limit can be exceeded dramatically. In fact, some of these multi-junction thin film panels are up in the 47% efficient range, because instead of having one PN junction, they typically have 6. So they're harvesting from different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. And we're saying that the one panel we were talking about is starting to harvest from the infrared spectrum. And if we could get harvesting from the ultraviolet, then cloud cover would be less of an issue. And we're beginning to see some nighttime panels as well. So all of this is technology that's changing the way and the efficiencies of our solar panels. I don't think it's going to be too far off in the distance that we're looking at 24/7 energy harvesting from solar, nighttime panels, cloud cover panels. I suspect there'll be variations in efficiency given different resources, but it will be a constant source kind of thing. So any comments on that? Nope. Anybody else have any technical issues they were raising, wanted to raise before the group? Issues, problems, annoyances?
Yeah, I had one, Jay. With the wattage of the panels going up and up and up, are the microinverters keeping up?
Yeah. Yes and no. Depends on which one you buy, of course. I think I saw that they've got some 800 watt microinverters, if I remember right. Is that what Bob may remember? The IQ8 Plus, which is a dual panel microinverter. So it's designed to plug into 2 panels. And it seems to me that was 800 watts for a single microinverter, which is pretty substantial. The ones we just installed, the IQ7 Plus, that was $295. We put them on 400 watt panels. So because of the clipping, with panels, it's often good to have about a 1.2 to maybe a 1.3 at the most, I would say, design ratio between your solar panel and your inverter. So having a 400 watt panel on a 300 watt microinverter is pretty good. You get good energy harvest from that. Just because there are very few standard test condition days that occur. So you're harvesting most of the time, you know, adequately, even though it clips off some on those really, really good days. But yeah, it is keeping up. Of course, one of the issues with the bigger and bigger panels is they're getting a little harder to maneuver. You know, they're big, you know, they're heavy. And used to be, they always tried to keep them under the, I think it's 40 pounds, 40-pound OSHA limit for
50.
one individual. Is it 50?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't seem to be worrying too much about that anymore. I guess they assume it takes 2 people. Jay, did you have a comment? I saw your hand raise up. Oh, just saying hi?
I just got a scoot, so hi and bye.
Okay, hi and bye. All right. Let me hit on some of the net metering thing. If somebody comes up with something else, of course, we'll let that go. But I wanted to touch on, I've seen a lot of stuff about net metering recently, and it brought up, and I just want to get feedback from the group. But as we start to get a deeper penetration of solar in the grid, we're going to see more and more pushback from the utilities. And one of the things they're addressing is the true up period. You know, so they seem, a lot of these utilities are going from annualized to monthly. That's one way of fighting back against net metering. So basically what that means is, let's say you run a credit, and you often do run a credit in the summer months, then they would net that up or true it up every month, as opposed to carrying that credit forward and then offsetting in the winter time lower production with stored credits. Often when they true it up, they're just paying you wholesale on the overage, which is in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 cents. So that's one thing they're doing. They're also moving a lot to fixed charges on your utility, non-bypassable. So it's like, I don't care how much you're producing, you're still going to give me some money, whether it's for access, you know, just connecting to the grid, or if they're charging transmission charges directly, that kind of thing. So that's a track. The other one is a lot of these utilities are going to time of use pricing. So, you know, depending on when you're using the power, it's different price. But when you sell them power back, they're giving you a fixed price. So what that would typically mean is, let's say that when you're buying power in the middle of the afternoon, maybe they charge more for that power because that's their peak load period. But you may be selling power back to them at the same time, but they're going to give it at their low rate, not at their peak load. So it's kind of like to their advantage there. One of the things that prompted me to talk about this is Georgia, in the state of Georgia, Georgia Power just reached their cap for net metering. So when they put their law in, they said, we will provide net metering until we reach 5,000 customers who are logged in on net metering. At that point, we're not going to offer it anymore, or we'll reevaluate. And this month they reached that, which struck me as a fairly low number, but and it is compared to, for instance, South Carolina has about 20,000 net metered customers, and Florida had about 60,000. So Georgia is a very slow adopter of solar, but they've got the cap. The articles didn't say whether they're actually going to stop doing it or not. That was up in the air, but they have the option. And California had a big bill that caused a lot of stir in the media, that they were going to change their net metering process. And it was all this is going to kill solar in California and all that. Well, this past week, the state legislature rejected that bill. So California is not changing their net metering policies. So that's good news.
Jay,
And, yeah.
here's a question. How common, you said they were truing up people and paying that with a credit. How common is that? Just because in Kentucky, what I've seen with 2 different utilities is that they just never, ever pay you.
Yeah.
they'll roll the credit, like Duke Energy will roll the credit forward forever, but they're never going to pay you any cash, even at wholesale prices.
Yeah, well, rolling it forward forever wouldn't be all that bad, but no, I don't know. My assumption always before was that, yeah, at the end of the year, they're just going to say, thank you very much. And then we'll start you at zero, because they can. But again, when I was researching this, they said typically when they do true it up, they will give you wholesale, to clear the books. And,
Okay.
I don't have a sense of how common that is. The articles were just saying it's becoming more common to change that period from annually to monthly. So,
Well, Illinois has annual.
Yeah.
You go for 1 year. If you're over, it goes to the wind. If it's under.
do they
then
pay
you
you
get
for
paid.
the overage? Do they pay you at all for the overage?
No, they just throw it in the garbage, and after 1 year, where you come out is where you come out, and if you owe them, you pay them, but they don't pay you.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. And I know, Don, you're an accountant. I mean, it would be a liability to the utility. If you carried it forward forever, that's something that's on your books that you just as soon
Yeah.
clear off.
It's like frequent flyer miles for the airlines. They hate to have them on there because they just sit there.
Yeah.
It's a liability always there. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think of it like the old cell phone packages, where you get X number of minutes per month, but you can carry them over, In the early days, you couldn't carry them over, but now today, I don't think they worry about that. So my thought on this has always been that as the utilities decide to make this more difficult to net meter, then somebody's going to come in to fill the marketplace. And this is where I would love to get some feedback. But as I was doing the research, Google back in 2010 got permission from the FERC to become a utility. So what they said was essentially, you now, Google, have permission to sell your excess power retail, as opposed to wholesale to other energy providers. Well, it wasn't a very big deal. Apple in 2016 got permission to become a utility. These guys have created subsidiaries. It's Google Energy, Apple Energy, Walmart has an energy company, Amazon has an energy company. And each of these companies has now permission from FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to be retail sales, to be a retail company. And so I'm just thinking about it. If I were running Apple, for instance, and I envisioned in the future becoming a major player in the energy industry, how would I go about that? The first thing, of course, is get permission. So that's all done. Then you start saying, all right, well, I'm a major consumer of energy. So how about if I start installing my own renewable sources and I am my own customer first? And that's all I have to worry about until I've built up more solar than I have capacity, internally. And some of this capacity is pretty huge. Like Google apparently uses about 12.4 terawatt hours of energy per year. So that's a major utility in and of itself. Well, Apple just recently got to 100% renewable energy from their own sources. Now they've announced plans to build huge battery banks for storage capacity, which seems a logical second step to me because of the intermittency. If I want to be a 100% renewable energy utility, I got to deal with the intermittency issue. So I need to have some storage to deal with that. And then it strikes me that you begin to market to customers other than yourself. The big unknown that I have is how the heck you get how do you get them on the wires? You know, how do you get that power on the wire? And in all my research, I couldn't find anything that says they already have that ability. Clearly they do when they sell it to other energy providers, because those other energy providers already have capacity somehow on the grid, whether they're leasing it from other people or whether they own it outright. So anybody have any thoughts? Yeah.
Well, as I said, wouldn't you think that they would have, the group you just described would have sufficient political muscle that when they got to the point where they wanted to start transmitting their power, you know, putting those guys up against the utilities? I get that the utilities are good old guys with cigars, but the guys you're talking about have the cash in their hands for every politician who needs something. I mean, I imagine they're going to get a way to get their power out.
I would think so, even if they had to string their own lines. You know, they've got the money, but you're right, because obviously there are power companies that get access to the grid. So why not a company like Google? You know, and I think they make companies like First Energy look like small fry. You know,
Wouldn't they be the
Oh, yeah.
same as any other power provider on the state exchange?
I didn't catch the first part there, Dave.
Would they not be the same as any other power provider on the state exchange? Couldn't they just sell power like any of the other, most of the other providers are basically buying power from others and selling and reselling it?
Yeah, they could be a generation supplier, but the question is, how do they get it all the way down to the outlet? Because typically these other generation suppliers are just selling on the wholesale market to local utilities that then distribute it to their end user customer. So how do you bypass that network of, you know, the monopolistic local distribution? You know, you may be,
Somebody has to pay for distribution.
yeah, but I think I tend to agree with Don that these guys have the muscle to essentially, we've deregulated generation, and we've deregulated transmission, you know, over long distances from power plants to the local distribution system. Now the next step is, how do you deregulate the local distribution of electricity? Get into the AEP and the, you know, Guernsey Muskingum co-op world to say, now I need you to sell me or lease me access directly to your customer's house on all of your infrastructure. And I think that's the piece that's currently missing. But I think it's coming. And I think when it comes, it's going to come fast and furious. Because if the utility company makes it hard for me to sell my power back to them, there's going to be a lot of pressure for me to be able to sell it to somebody who then can turn around and distribute it, like Apple or Google or Walmart or who knows what, which then means that almost all of the largest utility companies in the country will own no infrastructure. You know, they will not be the people who own the wires. You know, just like Google and Facebook don't really have, I mean, what they sell is virtual for the most part. Any other perspective on that?
I think that's, I'm not sure if that's in contradiction to what we ultimately want or not. We ultimately want a very sophisticated distribution system that's capable of interactive power flows.
Yeah.
And what we want is the utilities to be the builders and managers of that, with the supply coming from myriad other sources.
Yep. I agree. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's going to solve some problems and it's going to cause some problems. Another issue to throw in there is, let's say, what would be the motivation of Google to get into the electric business? You know, selling electricity is not the greatest moneymaker in the world unless it's regulated. But maintaining and manipulating the data surrounding electrical use is perhaps quite lucrative. It
Some
would be,
some could be ideological too. I mean, think about the guys who run these places. I mean, they're doing things that are not necessarily economic all the time. Shooting space rockets into space, that's a good thing. You know,
Yeah.
it increases science, but I can't really believe that, you know, space tourism is going to be, or setting up a colony on Mars is going to be ultimately economical. I mean, they just do some things, I think, because they've got enough money. They're like the old, you know, the old kings. They just decide this is a good thing to do, and we'll do it.
sure. Well, their whole business model was built on that. I know Google, for instance, where's the money in a search engine that you're not charging for? You know,
Right.
well, eventually you come up with a plan to sell, you know, advertising, directing people to things. The space thing for Elon Musk, well, now he's going into broadband, you know, by able to launch all those satellites. I
Mhm.
think that if I have access to all of your data and we're moving into the Internet of Things, where most of the activity on the internet will be electronic devices communicating with other electronic devices, and I control the flow of those electrons, and I can monitor that flow, that's going to create some interesting marketing opportunities. Not
You
quite
mean my
sure.
ads would be more targeted?
Yeah, well, imagine, for instance, electric vehicles. And
Mhm.
you could manipulate the billboards as a vehicle is passing to advertise specifically to that individual vehicle. Or, you know, that might not be the best example, but
You've been watching too many movies. That wasn't that a Tom? Wasn't that a what's his name? It there was a movie about that where they did that.
yeah. Or imagine that you're providing a service for your electric vehicle. Well, I'll let you charge up free. I won't charge you anywhere for your electric, as long as I can throw little advertisements on your dashboard. You know, if you're wanting to stop for coffee, there's a Starbucks coming up, and Starbucks just paid Tesla to tell you that. You know, it's that's kind of not outside the realm of current possibility.
That's
So,
starting to get creepy.
okay. Oh, SIG is just saying that they're closing down the college in Tampa because a tropical storm is coming, so he's heading out. So for one time, Bill, it's a good thing you're in Houston, right? Instead of in Tampa. Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to think when you marry the virtual nature of utilities with the Internet of Things, with the free cost of solar or the nearly free cost of solar comparatively, and the value of this data, you know, we're going to be moving into a brave new world of electricity. And I think it's going to come in an avalanche. I think, you know, we're hearing the creaking right now, but when it starts to go, I think it's going to go quick and fast, and nobody's going to be prepared for it.
You would think that First Energy would be fighting this tooth and nail because we're going to put them out of business,
Yeah,
especially that nuclear reactor, which we're paying billions of dollars to keep them running. And if we don't need them anymore, or we can get them from other sources, then that's more economics in the long run. I mean, that's better for everybody except First Energy.
yeah, I agree. I think the utilities are in big trouble. I also think that they're not managed by people with vision, you know, that they are stuck in a 1950s, 1960s mindset, and they will not react in a way that will ensure their continued survival. You know, that's fairly typical.
They'll keep going back to the government for handouts like they've been doing now.
Yeah, but we see this in every huge transition. You know, the railroads were the major transportation hub. Why didn't they dominate the automobile industry? They certainly had the resources and the mindset if they had realized they were transitioning. Why didn't IBM and Bell dominate the internet and the laptop computers? Because they didn't have the vision. You know, why isn't Ma Bell running all cellular telephones? You know, because they didn't think cellular telephones were ever going to supplant wired technology.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's married to their current business model, and they don't really react to the disruptive nature of these kind of tectonic shifts until it's too late and somebody else is better at it than they are.
Well,
Some
first
people might
energy
say
would be
that
maybe
the
this.
problem with the university is not teaching the newer business models.
Yeah, well, if any of you guys are involved in universities, you think utilities are stuck in the 1950s.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, totally true. First Energy is probably the worst of the utilities in that regard, and they're
Yeah.
regarded as such on Wall Street. They have no respect from anyone, and they're struggling to survive right now. There are other utilities, however, that are much more forward thinking and are actually adapting and moving and changing their model. And that would include the utilities. Even AEP is changing their model. They own a lot of wind now, whereas they were very coal dominant. They're somewhat less coal dominant now. And
Yeah.
they're moving away from it gradually, although they're probably going to wind up with a lot of gas for a while. But NRG and some other more modern, more forward-thinking utilities that do have some leaders with some bit of vision have been trying to move more strongly in the direction of transitioning to the newer utility, the newer sources.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing, for instance, the first steps of beginning to segment their business model into generation, transmission, and distribution. Before they looked at it as a vertically integrated thing, now they're beginning to separate those out. You're beginning to see them switch some of their generation mix from coal and natural gas into solar and wind. That's part of it. But I just don't think they're reactive enough. They're saying, how can I take these new technologies and fix them and fit them into the model that I'm comfortable with? You know,
Right.
and their model involves controlling the generation process and the fuel sources, for instance, coal, natural gas, those kind of things, and the distribution model. Whereas a company like Google comes in and says, you know what, the value is in the data. The value is not in the electrons. We'll give those electrons away because we'll make 10 times more on the data manipulation. Well, how could First Energy or AEP compete against a company like Google that's giving you free electricity? You know, they're too disruptive, and those kind of companies will never respond. I mean, they can't. It's just it's the nature of business. You try and make it fit the old pattern, and realistically, it's worked for them over 100 years. You know, why would they think it's not going to work for them tomorrow?
Well, all of your examples were totally valid, right?
Yeah.
Worth pointing out.
I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to watch.
The part of the thing I think is that the United States is bad because chips now are a big problem. And it's because, and it goes back to steel, it goes back to other things we've had in this country. We didn't want to invest in the infrastructure to build these facilities to make chips, to make steel, to make that. And consequently, the rest of the world passed us. And now these people are looking for all these chips and they're going to the government, well, you have to give us money so we can do that because we don't want to spend the money to put the investment into this. And that's not forward thinking. That's going to hurt solar too. It's going to hurt solar really bad because the electronics we're going to be dependent on the rest of the world for all the components for this. And it's because we won't spend the money. We look at everything from a 5-year term and the rest of the world looks 20, 25 years out.
Yeah,
So,
I'd say we look at it from a 3-month term as opposed to 5 years, Will I get next quarter's bonus? Yeah, well, I know when I was in the MBA program, they always like to talk about things like just-in-time inventory control systems and things like that. And I think we're beginning to see that when you have a just-in-time system, like with microchips, okay, they'll arrive the day before I need them. Well, if you have a disruption in your supply chain, everything stops. just in time requires everything to work as designed. And it doesn't. So I think we're going to have to see in all aspects of our lives a resiliency built into everything, multiple pathways. You had not, Bob?
No, I wanted to add something
Yeah.
here. I live a term life. Years back, I was in Hawaii on my vacation, once a lifetime vacation, and I was in a vacation rental. And it was during Thanksgiving, and so they all got together, had a Thanksgiving dinner, and I sat next to a guy, and get this, he was the marketing guy for one of the major chip manufacturers who determined what the volumes of production were. It's not the company, it gets down to one guy.
Yeah.
Normally. And what you said is exactly what he said. He says, we can't keep up with the changing market. The pandemic comes, everything goes down, they lay off, and then they have to come back up again and stuff like that. And they follow the money. There's no two ways about it. Because me as a manufacturer ordering their product, I'm out at 16-week lead times on their chips, and where GM is maybe 8 weeks out and stuff like that. So,
Sure.
but what you said, it's all supply demand, and nobody's guessing right, and they don't have the computers to guess it right yet.
Mhm.
It's too volatile of a market.
Yep. Well, we're getting to the end here. Anybody have any solar related things? I just thought this was an interesting topic to contemplate our navels. Yeah, John?
Yeah, what was that term you were using for those non-Prop 21 microinverters?
Yeah,
Like-
the California Rule 21, which
Yeah.
was adopted in many jurisdictions. If they're compliant with the California Rule 21, which is basically referred to as smart inverters, that will be it'll be listed as a UL 1741 SA compliant. The SA just stands for supplemental addendum, meaning it's a smart inverter. And if you buy new inverters from any of the manufacturers, they're going to be California Rule 21 compliant. But where John and I got in that conversation was if you wanted to buy some remaindered inverters, you can get some good deals, but they will be UL 1741, full stop, no SA. They're not smart inverters. Not every jurisdiction will let you install those. So you need to check with your utility to see if you have to have the SA, the smart inverters installed. If you don't, you can get some good deals on some microinverters for sure, and some older inverters.
Okay, I'm looking, I haven't found them yet.
Oh, you mean the good deals?
Well,
Yeah.
for the 1741 non-SA remaindered inverters, I have not found them yet.
Yeah, and it may be that, well, I would look at Sun Electric out of Florida. If you check those guys.
I already talked to them, they said they sold them all.
Oh, they saw, well, they may have all gone through the system.
Yeah,
You know?
so they're gone and that's it.
Yeah, because they're not going to make any more. But I was able to get some N-phase microinverters for $29 a piece, because they were remaindered, and they're all good. They all work, and it's just that they're not California Rule 21 compliant. But then, of course, neither is my utility. So they do stuff that the utility doesn't take advantage of. So it's not like they're bad. It's just that they have bells and whistles that aren't being utilized by my utility. Okay. All right, but if you do have a non-SA microinverter, they're all going to be grandfathered in. So it's not like you got to change them out. All right, any other questions before we adjourn? Yeah, Bill, did you get your mic? Yeah. I still don't hear you. No. All right. Next meeting starting. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see you all next week, next Tuesday. Take care.
Every week.
Yep, you too.